And so we come towards the end of today's lecture. Finally, I'm exhausted. And so I'm going to skip a couple slides that show other examples of Egyptianizing, miniaturizing decor. Quick quiz when we come to talk on Wednesday. I would like you to tell me what style of wall painting this room is in. And then we will have a quick discussion about what it means to have sort of miniaturized Egyptian looking decoration in a Roman house. Is that Romanization? The Romans certainly conquered Egypt, but why is Egyptian imagery conquering the Roman house in return? So we will discuss those things. But now I want to go back a little bit away from the sort of bottom up and caricatures. I want to look back a little bit more at this imperialist point of view by going away from Pompeii to instead an imperial villa from about, let's see, 60, 50 years later. So we're in about 130 CE, roughly, during the construction of this villa, as opposed to Pompeii, which is destroyed in 79. So Emperor Hadrian, he follows Emperor Trajan, and he is a bit controversial as a ruler. He's very into Greek culture. He goes to Athens frequently. He loves traveling in general. He falls deeply in love with a youth from sort of northeastern Greece, Bithynia. It's not really Greece. And that boy, Antinous, becomes his companion. They go to Egypt together. Antinous actually dies in Egypt under extremely mysterious circumstances. Hadrian, with his sort of international interests, intercultural interests, is at times painted as someone who's a bit of a dilettante, like a little bit involved in everything, but not smart about anything. He's also, in some cases, considered someone who does like witchcraft. But at the same time, he was really interested in architecture. He was really interested in monumental building schemes. So as an emperor, as a patron of the art, we have an awful lot to sort of thank him for as art historians and archaeologists today. So one of the most famous things that Hadrian builds, in addition to the wall up in Britain that sort of marks the first boundary on the Roman Empire and gives up expansionist ideas, is his villa. And there's an ancient quote that I want to read you really quickly here from the Historia Augustae, which is a general sort of history of the imperial leaders of Rome throughout a longer span. And the author, who we don't know who it is, writes, Hadrian astonishingly built a villa at Tibur, which is near Rome, in such a way that he might inscribe in it the most celebrated names of both the provinces and places. And so he named them the Lyceum, Academy, Prytaneum, Canopus, Poicile, and Tempe. And lest he should pass over anything, he even made underworlds. So if you want to know what those places are, most of them are in Athens. We have the Lyceum, the Academy, the Prytaneum, the Poicile, the Stoa Poicile. Those are all Athenian buildings that are famous for various philosophical movements that arose in them or for their political significance. I know last time we talked a little bit about the Prytaneum and the hearth fire that would cross from colony to colony from the mother city. Then we have from the Valley of Tempe, which is up here in sort of northeastern Greece. And then we have the Canopus, which is a famous canal down just outside of Alexandria, Egypt. And then the underworld is, of course, a mythological place, the underworld where the shades of the dead live under Hades. So Hadrian, as this sort of dilettantish emperor who travels a lot, gets this reputation for being a little bit maybe selfish or self-absorbed or too interested in things that shouldn't be important to an emperor, like silly art and architecture. as an emperor, you would like to be a patron of these things, but perhaps not the designer yourself. You should have bigger things to think about. So he becomes controversial. He has a better reputation nowadays than he did in his sort of in post-mortem period. Um, so this is a map of Hadrian's villa, and we're just going to look briefly today at the Canopus, so that piece that is based on Alexandria, and the island Domus. And so a quick note on Hadrian's villa. As you can see, it is enormous. This plan here shows what has been excavated and what is known, but there's a lot of areas that we don't know what is there, and the villa seems to have continued beyond the boundaries of what we know. The names of areas that I'm using and that other scholars use, for the most part, were given by the excavators and scholars in response to similarities to what they know of in other places that they read about in the Historia Augusta, right? So we know that Egypt in Alexandria had a famous canal called the Canopus. Because we have this interesting canal feature back here, scholars assume that must be the Canopus. So this is circular reasoning, undoubtedly. We only have a literary source that tells us that Hadrian called it that in the first place. And then we're sort of using our knowledge of a foreign landscape and how it maps onto this local landscape to try and find resonances between the archaeological remains, which have no labels, and what we hear of in this history text. So that's a little bit of a leap, but I'm going to sort of set that aside for now and move on. I'm going to pause for you. So if you look at this, is a plastic reproduction of what Hadrian's villa might have looked like when it was built up in antiquity. It's now at the archaeological site to see before you go visit. You can see, for example, here, this maritime theater, this island domus that is marked here. This is that portico, the poikile, the stoa poikile, that is here on the plan. So you can see sort of how these structures map onto the plan that you have above. Nowadays, the villa doesn't really look like that. In fact, if we want to get a better idea of how luxurious and lavish this site would have been, we actually have to go and look at a more contemporary structure from the 16th century, and that is the Villa d'Este. So much of the removable decoration, including statues, wall and floor coverings from Hadrian's villa, were taken off by an architect named Piero Ligorio for his work on the nearby Villa d'Este. Here's a plan, an engraving of what Villa d'Este looked like, with its extremely lavish gardens. So here are some views of what the gardens look like in more contemporary times. As you can see, the landscape is really kind of rich and green around here and pretty stunning. And we have loads of fountains, loads of water features, loads of sculpture. You can see all different eagle sculptures here with these banks of fountains running into the distance. So this is a sort of lavish Renaissance villa created for a cardinal who was really important in the Catholic Church at the time. And his architect, Piero Ligorio, was going excavating and sort of exploring parts of Hadrian's villa, taking materials from there and bringing them to his patron's house. So we can almost get a better idea of just how fabulous an experience it would have been to visit Hadrian's villa by looking at pictures of this contemporary, more contemporary villa from the 1500s, late 1500s. And as you can see, we have lots of sort of decorations that are taken from various other contexts and reconfigured into these Renaissance planned gardens at Villa d'Este. If you ever visit Italy, I would highly recommend visiting Villa d'Este. It's one of my favorite sites. Back to Hadrian's villa, nearby. They're in the same town, very close together. So the first site that I want to visit is this Island Domus or Maritime Theater. It has a couple different names, Teatro Marittimo, if you're going Italian. Um, and this doesn't have so much to do with intercultural, or at least not directly with intercultural influences. Rather, I think it's a really interesting way that Hadrian has taken the form of a typical Roman townhouse, that stereotypical domus form that we talked about earlier, and transplanted it into this odd global villa that he has. And what he really ends up doing is placing a miniaturized version of a townhouse. So we talked about miniaturization, or I want you to think about miniaturization, with at the heart of his sort of global villa, with all of its tendency to take from Egypt and Greece and Rome and all of these different places that are under Roman control and under Hadrian's control as Roman emperor. So if you look at the plan of the island domus here and a view of what it looks like, on the outside you have a ring portico, so a covered circular colonnade with a covering over your head. And then you have a moat with removable bridges. And then from those bridges, you access the actual little miniaturized house at the heart on this island in the middle of a walled area with this ring portico around it. You have removable bridges onto a private island for the emperor probably to hang out with only his most intimate of associates. But if you look at the plan here, it actually follows the plan of a domus in a sort of odd circular way. We have an entranceway here and an entranceway here that are rather narrow. They come into this central courtyard area where we have colonnades and an open roof. And then off of this atrium-like space, we have an assortment of rooms, including rooms that seem to be sitting rooms or libraries. We have bedrooms, and then we have an entire bath suite. We have like a cold pool, a hot room, and a tepidarium, a warm room, all here just kind of tucked together in this really wonderfully economical package. So it's a very cute little house and very private in a way that the rest of the emperor's villa with a massive staff to run it and a lot of important visitors would probably not be. So here's just a couple other views of the island domus. So we have, not only do Roman artists and patrons and architects take from other cultures and then adapt them to suit new needs, we also see, in this case, the ultimate Roman patron, the emperor himself, designing innovations based off of Roman characteristics, Roman cultural characteristics, and kind of adapting them and changing them to suit this more globalized model. So if we're thinking about how there might be a sort of a back and forth between Romanizing influences and influences from these cultures that Rome is coming into contact with, then affecting Rome in return, we can also see that process at play within Roman culture. So we have a Roman emperor taking what is a really common cultural form, a common cultural idiom, and then using that to sort of play a little bit and create something a little bit architecturally new in an exciting way. Gonna need one more video. Sorry, everybody. We'll be back momentarily.